All right, everybody, it's Dr. Bosworth, and once again, I swear there's going to be a day that I push record and nothing goes wrong. This last reset, I had no camera, so I hope you can see me. I'm Dr. Bosworth. Welcome to my channel, and we are live streaming today with one of my favorite guests, Jennifer Marie. Jennifer Marie has been on the show several times. Our conversation started nearly, let's see, how long ago was that?
Was it
I
November?
think it was November was when we first met, and the conversation started with she wanted to help. She reached out to me for help with a weight loss process, and said that she'd been keto for over 18 months. And as we talked, I said I have a huge amount of followers that don't have a lot of resources for cooking. I can give you plenty of science-based lessons, but I can't give you a very good cooking lesson. If it takes a little longer than 15 minutes to think about, probably not going to happen at my house. So that's where I invited Jennifer Marie to come onto my channel. I'm going to do my best to bring her onto this little chat here. So there she is. Yay, you can see Jennifer. Give a thumbs up to Jennifer and say welcome to our channel. So usually we are recording on Sunday nights, but she traveled this week, and so instead I said, Jennifer, let's do a follow-up in the middle of the week, and we're going to do this on YouTube so that I get a chance to use some of the teachable moments that I've been wanting to talk about with Jennifer's case. So we also have a couple of really cool announcements that we're going to talk about today, and then at the end we'll take your questions. So once again, thanks for hanging in there. It did take a little 15, 20 minutes to figure out how to get the camera to work after it wasn't working. And I appreciate everybody being patient. So we're going to start with just asking Jennifer. She had almost a week and a half now since I've checked in with her. So I'm going to pass the mic over to her and say, how have you been?
I've been great. How have you been? I miss you.
I will tell you, it is a much easier go at it when you are the leader of our talks. I am getting better, though. It is a skill set that if one little thing isn't working, Jennifer unfortunately got to hear me as I'm like, why can't I see myself? And I'm like, just stand by, Jennifer. I'm working on this. But the week actually was interrupted because you had some traveling, and the traveling was it was keto, and it sounds pretty fun. So why don't you give us an update of what you did?
So I went to low carb Denver. I'm from Texas, so first of all, I saw some snow. I know. I'm sorry. I know you guys are having really bad weather, but I never see snow. But most importantly, I got to hang out with some really amazing people in the low carb keto space, like Jason Fung, Dr. Eric Westman. Oh my gosh, there's so many. I was in awe of the talent and the scientists, the doctors, the nurses, the dietitians, the professors. I was just surrounded by the most amazing people on the planet. And it was just a lot of information to take in. And I'm still digesting it, right? Like, it's just so exciting.
The other part, the first time I went to a keto conference, it was one of the metabolic conferences about 3 years ago, and I didn't know any of those names. And now I remember reflecting back, and in fact, looking at my notes from the first one saying, oh, this guy lectured directly to me as the first time I went to a conference. But it really does almost solidify that you're not on this journey by yourself, that there really are some it can feel a little lonely, especially as leaders of a big, you've got a great big Facebook page and a following on your own website. I, again, often feel like I'm talking to myself on a YouTube channel that's filled with an audience, but it's not with real people. So it's one of those places where I find such satisfaction with meeting people that are also on the journey. Just a couple of announcements here. So now that I've caught my breath and kind of got over the hiccups of our start, if you will help us by learning a little bit about you, today we have a very specific question, and that is, when I want to know, first of all, where you're from, but second of all, I want to know if you have a keto cookbook in your home. And so, not just what I've done many times, which is Google a recipe or look it up on the internet or make it up. I do not recommend you copy me. But if you have a keto cookbook in your home, I want to know. So, I'm watching the comments as we do this too, so I'll be watching to see where you're from and if you've got a keto cookbook. So as you were there, a couple of the texts I got from you, one of them was Dr. Westman, who is between him and Dr. Fung. I'll just give you some background for physician talk. When you look at the personalities of day one in medical school, they've actually studied this. They look across the room, and if they profile people, the personalities that select different industries are unique. Those who select to be a psychiatrist are a different profile than those who select to be a pathologist. Dr. Westman, Dr. Fung, and I are all internal medicine. So we didn't know we were going to do that on day one. Maybe they did, but I didn't. But as you kind of collect who thinks like you and who is detective or internal medicine tends to be, we like really tough problems. We like getting really into the science of things and a very thorough explanation. Dr. Westman went on to practice at Duke University, but really spent most of his career addressing health problems with weight. So they've called it several different things, now calling it a HEAL clinic, but incredible teacher and rooted in the science of how do you hack the metabolism in your body to improve it. Jason Fung, also an internal medicine physician, he started out, internal medicine is what you do before you become a nephrologist. And of course, so every time I hear them lecture, every time I read one of their books or read one of their blog posts, I feel like this comfort that they speak a language that's very, very nice for me. So when you met Dr. Westman, you got to hear about one of his ideas, which is the HEAL clinics. Why don't you explain what that is?
So yeah, I was actually very interested in HEAL clinics before I met him, and I went to go sign up, but I wasn't exactly sure what it was. So I had a really long conversation with him. Basically, they will have a relationship. HEAL clinics is kind of like the relationship between Target and Starbucks, where Starbucks is inside of a Target.
Mm-hmm.
HEAL clinics is going to be the keto low carb specialty within clinics, which is super exciting, right? Because as we lead these big groups, the biggest problem is, how can I find a doctor? Where can I find my doctor that supports low carb and keto? Because there's so many doctors that just don't have this information that is so valuable to us, right? And so you sign up through them, and basically it's almost, I don't know if this is the right way to explain it, but it's almost like you get a sponsor or a coach as you would with AA, and it's very hands-on. Your coach only gets 8 people that they can help, but you get their phone number. So if you're sitting there making dinner and you don't understand an ingredient, you can call your coach.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's the same thing, though, that you and I are doing in many ways on a very superficial level. He's taken this to the next level where we can see the questions come in. We can see our inboxes filled with these questions. And you and I use your experience and my love of teaching and expertise to educate. And really, it is that, except on a personal level in the communities where they belong. So, that is he's one of my heroes. So is Dr. Fung. And I just was so happy that you got to meet him and hear his ideas. He actually pinged you a couple of things that I wanted to, you said I left and I wanted to get some lab tests done. And why don't you tell, just to remind folks about the history that you've had and why you wanted to go get some of those lab tests done.
So yeah, I'm still on my keto journey. I've lost 65 pounds and I have 30 more to lose.
Yay!
So,
congratulations. That's a big deal. It's really big, everybody.
Yes, and thanks to Dr. Annette Bosworth for helping to coach me through the stalls and teaching me about intermittent fasting, actually getting me through intermittent fasting, because I'm not one of those people who like it. There are people who like it. Did you know that?
There are some who think this is really fun. I continue to practice it, but
Yeah,
I kind of think of it as like piano lessons at those years where you're learning an instrument that you're just, the joy's not there yet. I'm like,
that's right.
maybe someday, but I just do it.
Exactly. I'm the same way, I think. I'm not at your level, but I'm getting there. Anyway, I was able to meet Dr. Eric Westman and have a very detailed conversation with him about his clinic, his goals, and all the things that he's doing. And then after a really neat conversation, he actually came to sit by me in the conference, and we started talking a little bit about me and how I had a very long time ago in 96, I think it was, I had the Roux-en-Y procedure, which is actually a bariatric procedure, very intense, where they, I don't know how to explain this.
No, I can help you with this. So yeah, this is a very classic weight reduction surgery. It's very well documented that this is, the only way you can lose 100 pounds. And they have lots of criteria in the clinic saying we don't let the insurance companies pay for it until they are a certain level of heaviness. And did your insurance cover it when you did it?
Yes, I had tried multiple things to lose weight through low fat. Everything I was told to do, I did, and I never lost weight.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I was this was in the very beginning where it was almost unheard of for insurance to cover it. I was one of the first approved to get it done.
Right. So I have a little lesson prepared today, just talking about not just the Roux-en-Y, but also Dr. Westman said, well, has Dr. Bosworth ordered some of these tests and where are you at? We are waiting for some of the results to come back. We just had those done Monday or Tuesday. But the discussion that because you did lose the weight and then you put weight back on. Is that right?
That is correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right. And, several times, you've said, my husband and I have both, you and your husband have both lost weight. And we've talked about, well, aren't you good enough? Isn't this a good enough weight loss? And we're gonna unpack that a little bit today. But before we do that, I didn't get a chance to really coach Jennifer before this. Jennifer, I'm going to flash up a picture of your big announcement. So they can still hear you, and I'm about to flash this up if I can do this right. Let's see here. Overlay me. All right, there we go. Okay, so I am going to show a picture. Why don't you use this moment before we go into our little lesson about your big announcement that you made on your channel last week. And I said, we need to have you on my channel to make this announcement. It is in the show notes down here too, but I'll let her steal the airwaves here. So why don't you go ahead and tell us what your big announcement is?
So my big announcement, this is so exciting. I have a keto cookbook. It's called Keto Friendly Recipes. Mm-hmm. And it has been amazing to just be able to contribute. So I have a love for food, obviously, but making keto friendly food and having that love for food, like it really has to taste good. So selfishly, I really wanted all of my favorite tried and true successful recipes all in one book. And when Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, my publisher, reached out to me to do this, I was like, heck yeah, let's do it. So there it is.
So, that's amazing. You just said the word publisher, and it kind of gives me the tingles because after writing a book, those aren't easy to have them call you. Give everybody a little story about how this happened.
Oh my gosh. So I was not out looking to make a cookbook deal. I had one smaller publisher reach out to me, kind of walk through the things, and I thought, God, that's a lot of work, and there's not a whole lot of money, and no, I wasn't ready to do it. Last summer, HMH reached out to me, and I was thinking, is this a scam? Because I was like, who wants to just send you an email from New York? And doesn't it seem that all the scammers are from New York? I mean, I know.
Right. Well, they're not your neighbor. I mean, scams don't happen near you. They happen far away from you, right? That's
right. Yeah. So we were going through email, and I get a good sense of people when I talk on the phone. So I was like, we need to have a phone conversation. And sure enough, I got on the phone and very quickly realized this was a legit deal.
Wow.
And then I didn't, okay, this may be a little bit ignorant on my part, but when I think of Harcourt, I always thought of education material. And I remember, don't laugh.
No.
But I remember seeing Harcourt on the back of all of any book that had to do with school. So I asked them, what does HMH want to do cookbooks for? And he kind of chuckled and he said, oh, sweetie, he was very nice about it. And he said, do you know the old Betty Crocker red and white gingham cookbook? And I was like, are you kidding? That's only like the OG of cookbooks. And I have 3 different versions.
Wow.
I started to name off the years that I had. And he goes, that's our cookbook. He goes, it's the longest selling cookbook.
Oh my goodness.
And it's been successful for 80 years. I just about melted in my seat. And I was like, how could I?
So the connection that here was, one of your top books for cooking, and now they were reaching out to you, and you didn't seek it out. Like, this is where, if you've ever written a book and you say, well, now what do I do with it? Most people don't get this magical phone call. So it's really a testimony just to say the connection you've made with your audience and just how much trust you have from the people that you've been educating and you've been helping for so long. I've put the link in the chat over here so that they can order your book. I also put the link that Jennifer Marie says if you'll pre-order the book, she has a gift for you. And that is, why don't you explain what is in the gift?
So the book doesn't print until May the 7th. So I was thinking, what could I give the audience? If somebody, well, first of all, if you need a cookbook, this is like the best. I am specialty at very easy recipes. These are not going to be recipes where you don't understand the ingredients or you got to go some store or order it online. Like, these are real recipes that I make for my own family. But I started to think, how could I help the people who are going to order this book pre-order? And I decided to make a big combination of recipes, 3 months worth of recipes, shopping lists, and meal plans. And it's a digital file that I will give to you free if you pre-order the book. And I had one printed out.
Yay!
Look at how thick that baby is. Like,
that's awesome.
I added so much value in there that I didn't even realize how much stuff I have that I really like. So if you pre-order the book, you can actually take the receipt from the pre-order, go to lowcarbinspirations.com/pre-order and claim your digital downloads. And you can print them off like I did, and you can start using those right now.
Right. So we're going to save, Jennifer, I've asked her to save her favorite recipe from the book to talk about in a few minutes. We're going to go into her little medical lesson and do some teaching here for a minute. And while we do that, I do still want to know, for those of you that have just joined us, please give us a shout out of where you're from. And then we want to know how many people out there have a keto cookbook in their home or in their kitchen. I'll tell Jennifer this. Jennifer has the kind of recipes that even I can follow. I do not boast about being a good cook. I am a great physician, but cooking better be fast, easy, and quick. Thank goodness when you cook with high fat, it usually tastes pretty good. But I've still managed to screw up several recipes. So Jennifer's got her favorite recipe hanging out there for us, but I wanted to go through something that Jennifer had mentioned probably 2 months ago now. And for those of you that haven't followed her story, there is a playlist on my website that is called Consults with Dr. Boz. This is one of my favorite playlists because it is really me talking to a patient, me educating Jennifer Marie, and definitely looking into her health problems and looking into what it means to really tackle one of these problems. Her problem that she reached out to was it was a weight problem. She wanted to know, well, gee, doc, how do I decrease the weight? I've been stable on keto for 6 months, or actually been probably more than that, but it'd been 18 months that she'd been keto, and her plateau is really where she was struggling to say, I don't know what to do about this. So I said, well, let's do some biohacking. Let's get you testing yourself. Let's teach you a few things. We got through the first several months and had some pretty good breakthroughs about Jennifer Marie understanding herself better. But there was a comment that she said, and I can't even remember if the comment was online or offline, where she says, my husband just says I've lost so much weight, I look great enough for him. Even if I never lost the extra, and I think there were probably 40 pounds that we were still looking at losing then, it doesn't really matter. And so I'm going to turn over to maybe, let's see here. There we go. I am going to turn over to some of these, a couple of slides. And I might have to fix this. Give me just a second here. Where we're going to pull that down a little bit just so you can see that slide. So this is one of the slides that I teach from, and this is something that Dr. Westman used this word when talking with Jennifer Marie, and the word is called metabolic syndrome. We're going to come back to this slide, and I want you to focus on this one. So metabolic syndrome is a word that's used by physicians like Dr. Fung, like me, and like Dr. Westman, and instantly in my mind I think of patients that kind of look like the guy in the center there, the inflamed patient with lots of insulin. And immediately when somebody says, I think I have metabolic syndrome, this is what my mind does, is that I instantly think about the risk factors. Just to make it clear to everybody what metabolic syndrome is it is the phase that people get stuck in before their sugars get abnormal in a diabetic journey. So when people get overweight, their system does certain markers and changes. And metabolic syndrome is 3 of the 5 of these. One of them is obesity. And the first one, that first marker is measured by waist line. What is the number of inches that you are in your waistline? BMI is another way to measure it, but waistline are what this team used as their criteria. So for men, it was 40 inches around their waist, and for women, it was 35. I have Jennifer muted right now, but I'm going to ask her what her waistline is when we started, when she started keto, what it was when we met, and what it is now. And even if she doesn't know exactly, it's just one of those things that as we talk about, her husband says, you've still got great curves. You're doing so great. Do you really need to lose the rest of this weight? And this is the question that I'm addressing, saying, I want you to think about what I think about when I see people who have been overweight for a long time. I instantly think about their chemistry. A couple of things are that their HDL cholesterol is low, below 40. Their triglycerides are above 150. And their fasting sugars are above 100. The other criteria is high blood pressure with a number of 130 over 85. So you look at this criteria, and I'll be honest, it doesn't often mean what you think it does. I have Jennifer back online now, and just going to take, let's see, I think I have to do it this way. Give me 1 second. I think I got to do it this. Yeah, there we go. So one place you don't have sound, and the other scene you have sound. So now you have sound. But if you look at that criteria that I just went through, one of the first steps is to say, when patients are overweight and they don't think it has a lot to do with what's going on the inside, it is a struggle to fast forward their brain and get to the level where we say, no, there is a serious problem that hides underneath being overweight. And your goal of getting down to the body weight that you want to get to is absolutely spot on for what you should be getting to. I have lots of people say fat and happy is okay. My cholesterol still looks good. And what I can tend to talk about is there is a level of insulin that is creating a flame throughout your body, and you may not recognize the loss of some of those brain tissues or the problem with high inflammation at this stage of their life. But I take them to the grave, and I can show you this last season of life of high inflammation and what it looks like. So do you know your waistline?
So first of all, I just have to brag on you for just a minute, because the way you explain this science is just so easy to understand. Am I right, guys? Tell her in the comments. Like I feel like I just want to tell her that we love her because she explains things that I can understand. I can sit with doctors and sometimes it just goes over my head. I just love you for that. So thank you.
Mm.
So I don't know my waistline when I first started. I actually just measured it today, and you didn't even ask me
I
to
did
do that.
not.
But you didn't, but I was ordering something online and I just measured it probably 2 hours ago. So I do know that. I don't know that I want to share it,
It's
but
so you don't have to.
I
So
will. I will.
okay.
It's actually 35.5 inches right now.
So that is almost out of the range of danger. Isn't that amazing? So, I mean, you had said something a bit ago where you were shopping because clothes needed to fit differently. So we know that this has gone down in your case. And to have a waistline of 35 or less gets you out of the danger zone for metabolic syndrome. And, you know, as I flip back over to some of these slides, I really find that the key to the message that I want patients to dial into is when people say, hey, my cholesterol's high, doc, or hey, my cholesterol's good, doc. I don't really think about that as much as I think about the markers inside a metabolic syndrome. When I look at metabolic syndrome, this red bar is the measure of those with metabolic syndrome. And these were specifically selected to not have diabetes yet. They have metabolic syndrome. But look at the death rates, the mortality rates that went up. Almost 20% all-cause mortality over the 25 years of people that were studied that had metabolic syndrome. If they did not have metabolic syndrome, and again, that metabolic syndrome is 3 of the 5 of these. We're going to look at Jennifer Marie's cholesterol here in just a minute to show you where she does she fit into the metabolic syndrome or not anymore. So going back to that death rate, looking at cardiovascular mortality specifically, like the death scare that patients get saying, hey, if you go on that high-fat diet, you're going to have a heart attack. That's going to raise your cholesterol. And I'm here to tell you, it's not the cholesterol that increases the risk of death. It is this metabolic syndrome. And part of metabolic syndrome, I like this picture here. It shows all of the organs and what happens to them when the patient is overweight. Looking at that tummy, and as much as this is a man, but women have just the same issues where the tax on their systems from just being overweight continues to age their body faster, and especially when you start to measure things like the Dr. Boz ratio. We're going to do one more little slide here that I think is super helpful to teach, and that is when we look at predicting death. This is, again, another way to look at the data that I presented with in these little columns here. This is one way to present the data, but here's another way that I like how they sorted this out. Again, it's 25 years that they followed these patients, and they divided them. They checked several things, but one of them that they looked at was what are their insulin levels, especially the fasting insulin levels. And they divided the patients into 5 sections, with the lowest in that green line there and the highest in the purple line there. So of these 5 quintiles, the highest insulin is what predicted who died the most often. This was all major heart disease was this slide, but there's another one for all-cause mortality. Again, saying when we look at cholesterol problems, we think of patients that look like this. They are tired, they are inflamed on the inside, and that little devil up in the corner is insulin. You can talk about don't demonize insulin, and I'm like, no, we're going to demonize insulin. It has been overused and produced in most of the bodies of my patients. And one of the key tricks to looking at how do you get people to lose weight, you can burn fat by ditching these carbs. This is a diagram that came from Dr. Volek and Dr. Finney's book, where they said, when we measured insulin levels, if they ate 20 carbs per day, it was a very low level of insulin. When they got up to 30 carbs per day, their insulin got a little higher. But man, by the time you got to 50 or 100 carbs, or heavens, up to 150 carbs, you are not burning fat anymore. Your insulin will go high enough that it commands that you do not burn insulin anymore. I mean, that you do not burn fat. And I really think that slide teaches a lot about when we're trying to study and help a patient, get a better, you're back on air there, girl. When we look at patients and say, how could we possibly translate what we know inside their medical health history and the years of seeing patients to say, when I look at patient data, I look at the numbers that come in and I say, who is it that I'm most worried about? It comes with people who have those high triglycerides, which is one section of the cholesterol profile. I look at something called highly sensitive C-reactive protein, which is an inflammatory marker that is a better predictor of health problems than any of the single cholesterol profile. I'm going to put your cholesterol numbers up here. I don't know if you remember them, but I have them here.
I don't remember them.
Let me read them out loud here. So I'm going to take your picture away and say, okay, well, you almost can see them. Okay, so when it comes to the cholesterol numbers that we checked in Jennifer Marie, it was, let's see how long ago that was. You did them in, let's see here. I can almost get this to see. There we go. You did them in August of 2018, but you'd also done them before we met. So I'm going to slide that up just a little and get this down a little. The cholesterol numbers before we met, she had a total cholesterol of 230 in August of last year, but then had her 2016 numbers, they were 183, and her August of 2013, that's before she went keto, was 185. What I like to look at are that her HDL went from a 63 up to an 85. And there's another several of the lectures that when I was out at the conference that I went to earlier this year, an amazing connection to how much we can predict about the risk that Jennifer Marie has for a sudden heart attack or any kind of life event is related to, one of them is her weight, and one of them is her HDL cholesterol, one of them is her waistline, one of them is her blood pressure, and these markers do a much better job of predicting, is she going to have a problem, as opposed to looking just at that total cholesterol or even her LDL cholesterol. Her LDL cholesterol, those are great numbers. It was 108, then 100, then 114. All of them under the 120, that is the guidelines for saying, hey, we should make sure that their cholesterol is low, specifically that LDL or bad cholesterol. And, when you look more closely, her healthy cholesterol as she became keto went up from 60 right around 60 to almost 85, which is incredibly protective. I will give comment to this triglyceride that's 177, and that is that when I asked Jennifer Marie if you're back on air, by the way, when Jennifer Marie, does she remember the rules about getting her cholesterol checked? And she's like, no, I think I could eat, even hours before I got my cholesterol checked. And I'm like, well, it's really not a good way to check triglycerides. If you've had a meal within a few hours of checking your blood tests, those triglycerides are a response to that meal. And, as a physician, I know I learned that. I know I was tested on that. But as you get kind of lazy in your years of practicing, trying to remember to explain all the rules to every patient, I'm sure I missed it sometimes too, or wasn't quite as strict as I needed to be. But she doesn't remember fasting before that last set of blood tests, which would correlate to such a high jump in her triglycerides. All right, so I want you to hear that when we look at how we've worked on getting your weight off, one of the first things we talked about was the zip it zone, the time where there was nothing going in your mouth. Do you want to just give a brief kind of overview of the last few months, where you started, some of the ways you've kind of had troubles, and then other ways where you've been really great as far as restrictions?
Yeah, so my history, I was hypoglycemic. So you got to remember that we eat every hour, every 2 hours. It's even just little bits throughout the whole day. So this went on for years, and I'm sure a lot of your audience can relate. So even quitting 2 hours before bed was probably a start. Doing the first 12-hour window, it almost seemed like a bit of a challenge because it goes against everything I was taught. So there is a bit of a mind shift that you're not going to have this major sugar low. That you've been keto for so long, you can go for a long time, and you can. So for the longest time, I don't remember how long, but for the longest time, 12 hours really was all my body needed to get the scale moving again.
And
And then,
what numbers were you checking when you said, because that was the other thing that we started doing when you came on board, is we said let's get some science behind how we're going to help your body be sure
yes.
to lose weight.
Yeah, so I had never had a blood meter, never had a glucose meter where I needed to check the glucose and ketones. And Dr. Boz insisted that I poke myself and draw blood. So it's not, another thing I don't like to do. But it really is eye-opening to see how she made this ratio and how you can see what's happening within your body and really um, understand that if you I mean, just understand your sugars when you wake up first thing in the morning, after you eat certain things, and when you start fasting, how those get better and better and better. It really does help you to stay on track as well.
Yeah, that's one of the hardest parts about accountability is when patients would come in 3 times a year or 4 times a year and check their blood tests and expect that to be enough motivation to change behavior. There's no way that is often enough feedback for something that's so intimate in every minute of our lives, is what we choose for our foods, how often we eat. I've recently had some conversations with Dr. Jason Fung's team and their fasting teas, because I have had so many patients say, well, what can I have when I fast? What can I have when I fast? And water and salt are the best. I allow black coffee. But these fasting teas have been something where I said, well, I better study this and see what it does. But the key was, if you've got the tools like what you do, which is check your own glucose and check your own ketones, you can take one of these little packs and say, okay, but what does it do to me? And I think that's so powerful, because metabolism is shifting. If you look at your metabolism in November and now you look again today where we're at, your improvement in the way your body handles not just fat, but also times when you don't put food in. The first time, I think you were very disciplined, and that's always nice. But there's been times where you're like, I don't feel like doing this today. And I think those are really important to honor that's okay, but also to say, that's how most of the world is they're going to be good at something for a while, and then kind of the newness of checking your blood sugars will wear out. But then we say, but you still have the ability to check inside your system. They say, well, doc, I'm not losing weight. I'm like, before we start with not losing weight, I want to know what's going on the chemistry side of your body. So just kind of, I'm going to flash up this Dr. Boz ratio chart, and I just want you to tell people what's your goal when you fast, and or when you are checking your blood sugars. What are you trying to reach for? What have we talked about?
Okay. So usually, Dr. Boz ratio is you take your glucose numbers and you divide it by your ketones. So you want to get to a ratio that is under 80% for weight loss, 40% for immune boosting properties. And if you want to go absolutely strict, like Grandma Rose needed to do to fight cancer, it's under 20, which that lady is a rock star, because I have not done that, but just a couple of times.
Right?
It is very difficult. So my goal is always 80%, but I'm a bit of a overachiever, so I go for
right. You look at some of the shifts that when people use this ratio to help them estimate, what we're really looking at here is what is their insulin. And the insulin levels inside their body, you can go to the lab and look at them, but if you get a Dr. Boz ratio of 20 like Grandma Rose does, we know that her insulin state is very low. Insulin is a growth factor. It helps things grow. It insulates us by helping to grow fat cells and storage, but it also is a stimulator of, I was explaining the other day that a patient had a burn, and one of the worst things that you can do for a burn is bathe it in insulin, because it creates extra cells as that scar tries to mend back together. And if you've ever felt a keloid scar, a very kind of ruddy, squishy, very dense rope-like scar, we know those are made in states of high insulin. All right, so your ratio has been 80 quite a few times. In the last few weeks, you did another experiment where you put in a continuous glucose monitor. And we had a discussion the first week that you experimented what wine did to it. And then you were headed on a traveling, which was to the second week, I think, was low carb Denver, where you were going to be testing there. So what have you learned in the second week of wearing your glucose monitor?
So I do keep my sugars very well controlled.
Mm-hmm.
I did learn that. And when I travel, I think I get way more exercise. So I think when I travel, my ketones are way higher, probably because of the exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And probably because I remain pretty disciplined not to eat really late. I'm really exhausted in those things. There's a lot of mental stuff happening and meeting people, which is always exhausting. So I tend to eat early and go to bed kind of early. So that's pretty interesting. But I did have a situation to where I remember you saying, push your limits a little bit. I had not cheated in like 2 years.
Yes.
And I came back from a trip really late one night and I didn't eat enough. I was so hungry, and I don't get really, really hungry. So I knew I didn't eat enough that day. And I remember getting off the airplane thinking I'm going to take an Uber straight home. And I usually avoid airport food, but I needed something and I didn't want it to be right before I go to bed. So I stopped at this little kiosk stand and I saw this amazing, like pastrami, 5 pieces of really little pieces of pastrami, 5 pieces of little cheese, and it looked like olives. And I was like, oh, I'll take that. It was $10. And, but I was hungry. So devouring that before I get to my Uber, I eat the cheese, I eat the meat, and I'm about to open the olives and I'm like, these are hard. And I was like, well, that's weird. This just goes to show you how much of a keto brain I have, because I thought they were olives. It turns out they were chocolate covered almonds.
Oh my goodness. Oh my
and
goodness.
I was like,
yeah.
I heard this little voice in my head. Dr. Boz said, test the ratio, test to see, go a little overboard if you have to. And I'm like, okay, I couldn't force myself to cheat before because I was too afraid of that real sugar low and whatnot.
Right.
And I do remember before, when I did have sweets, that I would like to pair them with a protein because it wouldn't be so much of a sugar crash. And I thought, well, what a better way to cheat than with dark chocolate covered almonds.
Right.
So I decided to go for it. And I ate one and I was like, oh my God, this is so good. And it was like not terribly sweet like a regular cake would be, but it was definitely sweet. And I ate another, and I think there was only 7. And by the time I got to the 6th and 7th one, I cracked it in my mouth, spit out the sugar chocolate, and just ate the nut because it was just.
Oh my goodness.
I know. But I did watch my numbers, and boy, I think I checked with that glucose monitor every 5 minutes, which I think Dr. Boz told me, just do a 15, 30, 45-minute, 2-hour. Oh, no. I wanted to see what was happening. I checked that thing every 5 minutes. And I'm trying to remember, didn't my glucose spike to like 160 something?
Yeah, it might have even been higher than that. Yeah.
It was high. It was, I've never seen it like that. And then it came up, and I want to say under the hour, it started coming back down.
Right.
Which was shocking to me, because I know that when I've had a sugar fit like this before, it would last for a long time.
Yeah, I have another patient who is pregnant and did her glucose tolerance test at home with her glucose monitor. Similar things. The glucose monitor is a device that goes in your arm. And so, the first few times you poke your finger, it's very kind of stressful and interesting, but then it kind of just becomes a pain that you're poking your finger all the time, and it's kind of a barrier for people to check as often as I want them to check. So when they have a glucose monitor in, you can just wave the little device over your arm, and we get feedback of what is your sugar doing. So it doesn't like cost any more money to check it. It's just there, and so there's really no barrier. You don't even need to take your jacket off. You can just wave it over the device over the receptor in your arm. The one barrier is you need a doctor's prescription to get one, which I hope that changes someday, because I don't think they're that scary. They're just interesting. And with so many people, what you could learn in a 2-week trial of having a continuous glucose monitor, it becomes this place where people say, yeah, I don't want to poke my finger. I'm like, well, let's put in a monitor and see how you do. And then just watch how their sugars are these teachable moments. And patients have some feedback, some like, oh, look what happened. You know,
And,
go ahead.
and you know what? Let me tell you, because I got so many questions about this continuous glucose monitor, because everybody thinks it's so new. So let me just tell them real quick what the answers are to what everybody asks. So first of all, yes, it is just a little device that you stick in the side of your arm. It has this massive amount of adhesive that stays on. I took a shower every day for the 14 days and it did not come off.
That's right. Yep.
Now, I was a bit freaked out about having a needle in my arm, and I didn't want to sleep on that side. I was really weirded out by it. After a couple days, I didn't even remember it was in, so I was sleeping. I could not feel it. The other thing is, when my husband went to take it out, I was very nervous. I was like, "Take it out straight!" Like, da da da. Oh my gosh! When you take it out, it's not even like a needle.
It's not. No.
No, it's not. If somebody would have just showed me what it was ahead of time, I wouldn't have freaked out so much. It's not even a needle. You could literally take your finger and go over like this, and it's this bendable little
Yeah, it's like
probe.
a fiber optic or a fibrous thing that, you know, it's a spring loaded as it goes in. So I think that there's a device around it when you insert it, but that does not what stays there. And so it's really a cool device, because I had both patients kind of do it without me near them, and they did it great. They had no training. It was really almost foolproof to get the device correctly inserted. And then both of them said the same thing: unbelievably comfortable. Sometimes forgot it was there. And you know, I should have explained it a little more, that it's a flexible device. Well, so the questions that you got after putting it in were related to how weird is it, huh?
Yeah, yeah. And what spiked your, like I do skinny syrups, Jordan skinny syrups in the coffee. I didn't do too many because I was afraid they taste a little too good. And I wondered, did they mess with my glucose levels? Turns out they were fine. Yeah.
Very good. You know, again, a really good teachable moment. Very good job. So when it comes to your progress, you've had a lot of travel over the last few weeks. Do you think that what's your weight been doing over the last few weeks?
So what is my weight today? My weight today it was 186 point something.
Oh, wow.
And I know when I left, I believe I think I've down 2 pounds within the last 2 weeks. It's still very slow. That's probably, travel stresses me also. And this whole book launch has kind of stressed me.
Yes.
So let's just say that there's been a little bit more stress in the last 2 weeks.
Well, and you know, in all fairness, this is one of the things where, you know, I talk all the time about how important it is to support the people that are brave enough to come on my channel and to, you know, join me on Facebook and say, hey, these folks do a great job of, you know, sharing their story and allowing you to be part of their education. And one of the biggest ways that we can say thank you to Jennifer Marie is to help her succeed at this unbelievable dream come true, which is, you know, she didn't, you know, dream of being an author for the last 30 years. This is a passion of hers that has really come to fruition. And I can't tell you how many comments I get saying, I have learned so much from the way you coach Jennifer Marie and what she's done through her weight loss plateau, and just hearing about how her hormones were part of our attention and continue to be part of our attention. We have new labs coming back this next week, so we'll have some updates for that when we go live next. And the biggest thank you we can talk about is a pre-launch is a way for the publisher to see, you know, Jennifer Marie said she had all these fans and, you know, she's got these followings, but are they the kind of people that will support her when she needs it, which is buying this book, which is incredibly valuable in that I don't have any way to teach you how to cook. I Google most of the mistakes that I make, and when I look at, in fact, there's been a few times saying, all right, dinner's in 40 minutes and I have chicken in the fridge. What would you do? And she's like, here's the recipe I'd use. And it's really easy. I have used several of her recipes and found, boy, I could do that. That was not too bad. I actually found, it tasted great and easy instructions, and again, they're definitely tested recipes that taste good, which I have teenagers, so you screw up too many of them and they start saying no thanks to all of it. So I want you to share, before we go on to questions, I want you to share in your book, what is your favorite recipe?
You know, you asked me that, and that was really difficult because I do try to eat a lot of proteins, and I do try to eat very well. But there's one recipe that I really really like, and it's a biscuit recipe because I remember
Mm.
in the very beginning when I tried to make, I thought biscuits were forbidden, and the recipes that I did try, they were dry, grainy, flat. Bleh,
Mm-hmm.
and I perfected a recipe that I'm really, really proud of. And I think I like it because it's not only just a biscuit that you can have anytime, but I use it for on occasion. We'll do sausage biscuits and gravy.
Mm.
I use the same biscuit recipe as on top of a chicken pot pie for like a little bit of breading. So it was just one of the favorite ones. But if you ask my kids, because my kids have tested every recipe that's in the book, if you ask them, they would probably say it was the cheese sauce. And it's
Oh.
probably because the cheese sauce recipe, they can put it on their proteins, they can put it on their vegetables, but they can eat it by the spoonfuls too. And I kind of agree on the cheese sauce because I do vividly remember when I was doing keto in the very beginning, I went out to eat and I went to a Mexican restaurant and I asked for just fajitas with a side of pico de gallo, sour cream, cheese. And they brought me cheese, like a cheese sauce. And I didn't think anything of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't go out to eat a whole lot and make a whole lot of food at home, but I devoured all of it. And when I got home, I was kicked out of ketosis. And I was like, but wait a minute, I ate everything right. And I couldn't believe that in my research, I found that restaurants don't serve a cheese
Mm.
sauce, a real cheese sauce. They serve you a cheese flavored gravy. Oh
Oh.
my
Oh.
God. I did not know that. I mean, it
I didn't
sounds
know
kind of
that.
silly. You didn't? Okay,
Mm-mm.
because I felt stupid. I was like, I didn't know that. And so I make a real cheese sauce that will not kick you out of
See, those are
ketosis.
the kinds of things where it's so valuable that,
Yeah.
I have learned a lot about cooking, and I actually like to cook, but it's, life gets busy, and I have this recipes that are in your head that you do all the time, and then you try to ketify them and see if you can make them taste good. But no, it's the kinds of things where I'm like, I don't have any sort of substitute for anything close to a biscuit. My kids would freak out if I came home with something that looked like bread. Uh, so to know that that's got some good instructions, and then once again, it's not that you can't ever have a carb, but as soon as you add back a little bit of the really high carbohydrate breads, you're gonna crave that, and your sugars will go high. When you were at Low Carb Denver, you texted me posted a number of your Dr. Boz ratio, and I think your ketones were like above 2, and so it was like, wow, look at that, and she's at a conference. But it really comes back when you were talking about the temptations of the food that are around, and then you're really good about saying no. And then you combine that with something that you usually don't do, which is a lot of walking at one of those conferences. Walking is one thing, but those conferences are pretty much every hour there's a new place to sit and to be. So I would contend that one of the reasons your ketones and your glucose were so good in that, despite the traveling, was the activity that you pointed out. And again, that maybe it's that you tempt yourself with food often enough, like good food. When I go to those conferences, I feel like I need to taste all these different things, and I think they affect me more than they do other people, because my sugars definitely go higher when I eat some of them.
Yeah.
But you didn't have that problem, huh?
No, I tend to be, again, I don't know. I tend to, I have to go out of my way. Like here at home, I work out of the house, so the kitchen is here all the time. So there's just access to food all the time. Whereas if I'm busy, and when you're keto, you don't really think about food a whole lot until the
Mm-hmm.
evening. So it was very easy for me not to worry about food.
Mm-hmm.
And then going out to eat, going out to eat is the hardest. But luckily, Low Carb Denver made sure that the hotel had low carb food available. So they
Oh,
really,
yes, yes.
yeah, yeah.
So that you're gonna have to teach them how to make this recipe.
Yes.
For real, like I think that was one of the other things that was very attractive about the last conferences I went to, was they had people who are good at cooking as the supplier for the recipes. And boy, the idea of a biscuit, when you said that, my I don't know if you can see me, but my mouth dropped. I'm like, a biscuit? Really? There's a biscuit in there?
And you know, I don't make those things very often, but on a Sunday where we want to spend a little time making breakfast and it's like something special, it's really nice to be able to make sausage biscuits and gravy.
Yeah, and at the beginning of keto, and then now, you know, a couple years into this, it's easy to say I don't really miss it. But boy, at the beginning phases when you're like, I just need something that's not going to be the really high carbohydrate types of food. And, you know, just like we talk about sugar substitutes, the less you use them, the better off you're going to be. The lower the sweet taste, the better you're going to be. That craving and cycle are really easy to ignite over and over again. And that journey comes, but it doesn't, it's not very easy those first 6 weeks. Well, I can't wait to get my cookbook and to try that recipe too. So thank you.
Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
I'm super excited about it. I really hope to be one of the sources of a ton of cookbooks for you, because the thank you that we deserve to give you of sharing your personal story, you know, having a private woman, as much as you're in the world of sharing, it's a very private part of life when we talk about our healthcare, and to invite somebody to say, yep, this is a place you're struggling. I want you to be vulnerable and go on a social media event and share some of the hardest things to struggle with, like, why are you not losing weight? What is the problem? And you've just been so brave and so encouraging to so many people that if I can be the source of a bunch of book sales for you, I think it would be nothing but a warm and fuzzy for the rest of our relationship. Like, she deserves this, and I want you to have that kind of success as, if nothing else, a thank you for every one of the people that you've taught standing still and being vulnerable and sharing your cholesterol and your waistline. And
well, thank you too, because you have been a dear blessing to my family, and I really hope my husband gets the chance to come on to this channel, because he has had amazing success with his knee pain and all the stuff that you've done for him, and that's his story that he can tell. But I really hope he gets that chance as well.
Yeah, we are hoping, for those of you listening, that we can do that in the next week, because boy, I've had a lot of people reach out about how his sleep cycle has been, and you know, he's got a shift job, so sometimes matching him up with the times that we're available isn't as easy to schedule. But he is on my radar for the next week to get him live and say, how are you doing, and share that update on his story. All right. Well, so I am going to change this scene to just include me. And Jennifer, I can still hear you in my ear. So if you wouldn't mind looking through a couple of those comments to see if you see any that we should take care of. Oops, I got to take off that little, hold on here. So keynote, there you go. Me. Oh, whoopsie, that's what I need to do. Sorry. Hi. So, yes, I am back to try and answer some of these questions. You know, when I look at the scroll of comments, first of all, thank you for the folks out there teaching one another. I can see some of my favorites that have been, answering questions. And so there's a few questions for Jennifer Marie. One of them is, what is the max number of carbs in your recipes? And again, I can hear in my ear. So Jennifer, do you have an answer for that? I see. So she says each recipe is different, but she did put all the macros in that cookbook so that you can see what each of the carbohydrate content is in each of those. So, and I think that's a lot of work, but it is really important for, especially as you're learning how to make these recipes. So very, very good improvement on that. I am going to look for other questions about... Okay, I have, hi, Dr. Boz, question from a fellow provider, and Gabrielle Roca. Reversing type 2 diabetes is in my patients at an underserved or free clinic. What's your general approach to de-escalating diabetes medications, insulin especially? So I would actually, it's a great question, and I love to see that is one of the things that I didn't expect, which is several providers that have ended up, on the channel and asking questions about what's your strategy? It's for that reason that I try to pick difficult patients to put on the channel. Jennifer Marie turns out to have some of the best numbers for checking her blood sugar and her ketones that I have. So she's like my star child. But what she was is she had a gastric bypass. She had a time where the weight had been on for a long period of time, had come off after gastric bypass, then gained it back. And so she had some special things that we are going to be monitoring. We have monitored them once. We have labs again that we're going to go through in the next few weeks. But I find that subset of they've really intense about losing weight. And it's the other conversation I like to have is how do we not have them do surgeries for weight loss? How do we save their money and the consequences of those weight loss and teach them how to do keto? So I picked Jennifer Marie for that reason, and she's just been a star pupil. But the other patient that's on the playlist is a type 1 diabetic. And I am just so excited to see what she has done in the last 8 weeks. She's been on every week. Her average sugars when we started was over 300. She's a type 1 diabetic, so she'll never get off of insulin. Her body doesn't make it. But just like what this doctor's asking is, well, how do you start? Where do you begin? And, you know, the first thing that I do when they're not type 1, the doctor's asking, the provider's asking about a type 2, is I start with any of the insulin secretagogues, which mean the drugs that increase the production of insulin. And there's a class of those that those are the first ones that I'll pull back. I keep metformin on as long as I can. Metformin has other benefits for why we use that and why we like that. In fact, I'll add metformin to somebody who's in a weight loss stall or struggling with not being able to get those Dr. Boz ratios down. You know, the other thing, Gabrielle, is if you haven't gone to my website, bozmd.com, there's a free 70-page booklet. And if your patients just click through that, it links them to several of my teaching videos, most of the common questions from that journey. It really is an education for the patient that is the hardest part. Adjusting the medications becomes easy. You just start pulling off first the insulin goes off if they're type 2. The next thing is anything that stimulates the insulin. Like your glipizide, that class of medications. I'm not a big fan of the ones where it has you urinate out the glucose. I know they're new and I know they're really exciting and it's fun to learn about it, but it seems a little odd that through that base plate in the kidney that we're going to force a glucose molecule through that little bitty sliver that's not supposed to let sugar through. And I know that it's got good evidence and it does lower their A1C a couple of points, but I would totally be pushing a keto diet over that any day. I just think there's some future to that drug that we don't have any evidence for yet, and it's been approved by the FDA, so I'm not saying that anything disparaging, but I wouldn't do that if it was me, and I have not written it once for my patients. So the question comes back to what's first, and it is about lowering the insulin and then getting them off the drugs that make insulin produced. Jennifer, do you have any good questions that you found as you're scrolling through? Not really? Okay. So I've got a couple more that I'll do, and then we'll call it. I have a couple people on here that fell for the Kraft singles. I fell for that too. That's not real cheese, and there's way more carbs in those than you think. When Jennifer was talking about the fake, the gravy that's cheesy, it having too many carbs in it. But it is definitely a trick. My family fell for that too. Let's see. Lots of good hellos from where people are from. Somebody asked about the fasting teas. Those actually, that's another little thing that I've recently been very interested in. And that they are the ones that Jason Fung talks about, where it's the, tea is what can you have when you fast? And that is that salt, that water, black coffee. And then I've added these peak teas. And I'll tell you, it's way more satisfying than I thought it would be. I thought, no, I'm not a tea person. I like coffee. But I have used this. It's a slow brew under a pressure that they use with really they're pretty picky about their tea leaves. And then they crystallize it through a dehydration process that just makes for a very enjoyable experience. It's not a lot of work to make the tea, and there's quite a bit of the the antioxidants or the phenols, which again comes back to our lesson from today, which is, how can I predict who's going to have the highest problem with their being overweight? I think of Oprah as an example. She has, outwardly struggled with her weight, and she's a big proponent of the Weight Watchers, which doesn't limit your carbohydrates. And that journey continues to have her insulin high. And she hasn't gotten down to her ideal body weight. She really still continues to struggle. And when I think of, if I was her physician, what would be the things I would be concerned of? It is, as she ages, she makes more antioxidants, or makes more free radicals than she needs to. Her body oxidizes, it's what rusting is to oxidize. But when you look at a cholesterol that's been around insulin for a long time, that turns into this very fragile and very inflammatory setting. And any of the things that we do, including good sleep, keeping our cortisol lower, managing our stress, and then keeping those carbs under 20. But then adding things that do have high antioxidants, and that's what some of these teas are most known for, is they have a high level of the phenols that are in there. One of the easiest ways to do that is to have whatever it is that you drink on, supplied with that. And although green teas do have quite a bit in them, if the tea leaves are old, or if there's any kind of like musty or fungal, that happens to tea. That's not that uncommon, but you'll taste it and it'll taste really bitter. And I've just found I haven't had any of that as I've sampled these teas and tried to use that as part of my fasting ritual now. So those are the big highlights. I will continue to look at these comments and try to answer many of them back. I just want to say thank you to Harvey Lang out there answering some of the questions. He is another provider out there really trying to educate folks on the ketogenic diet, and I met him at the conference. Very, very thankful to see his help answering some of these questions. So I will sign off. Once again, I apologize for the late start, but I am here to say thank you to Jennifer Marie. So anybody out there that hasn't bought her cookbook or are looking for a way to gift a friend a gift, this is a great way to say thank you to Jennifer for all that she's done for us as we teach each other, but teach through her ketogenic journey. I'm signing off as Dr. Boz. Have a good one. Thank you.